All right, today let's talk about how to create a preconception plan. Now, creating a preconception plan is one of my favorite things to talk about because it is such an amazing opportunity to not only improve the outcomes of your pregnancy, to feel great throughout pregnancy, but also to improve the health of your future child. Like, there are so few times in life when we have such an opportunity to make such a big impact in our health. Now, let's talk a little bit about these details. What does it really mean to improve our pregnancy outcomes? Well, things like gestational diabetes and high blood pressure in pregnancy, as well as preterm labor, the size of your child when they come out, these things can be impacted by our health. And not just our health during pregnancy, but our health before pregnancy. So in the conventional world, usually we think, oh, I'm pregnant and now I'm going to start taking a prenatal. That's usually what our OB suggests. Maybe they're recommending taking a fish oil also, which is great. But in reality, what's really the best thing to do is make sure that our health is at its peak before getting pregnant, because that is the most critical time to make a change in the quality of our egg and sperm DNA as they come together to create that human, but also to really make sure that you are stockpiled full of all of the ingredients that your body needs to create this human being. It's not coming out of thin air. It's coming out of what you have in your body stored, what you're taking in. So it's really incredible to look at those things beforehand. I love that nowadays so many more people are interested in their health before pregnancy. So many more people are aware of the issues that can come up with getting pregnant and staying pregnant. And so even before having an issue, so many couples are looking for support in optimizing their health before getting pregnant. And I love that because, again, that is the most important thing that we can do if we have that time. Let's talk a little bit about the time frame. So, what is the best time frame to start preparing before getting pregnant? Ideally, I recommend at least 6 months of preparation before, again, if you have that time. If you'd like to start sooner, great. It's never too soon to start preparing for pregnancy if you know that's in your journey, in the next year or two. But at least 6 months is a great time frame to make sure that everything is on point. For those of you who don't know me, I'll take a moment to tell you a little bit more about myself. I'm Dr. Miranda Naylor. I'm a functional medicine doctor specializing in women's hormonal health and fertility. I love working with couples on preconception health, again, looking at both the male and female side to make sure that their health is optimal, and so that they'll have optimal outcomes when it comes to getting pregnant, staying pregnant, and having a super healthy, incredible baby. So let's go into what a preconception plan can look like, because that can feel maybe a little bit obscure and complicated. So the main details of a preconception plan would include our lifestyle factors, our nutrition, supplementation, as well as testing. I think testing is a really important piece of making sure that our health is where it could and should be before getting pregnant. Let's start there. Let's talk about testing. So at the least, I recommend testing some of the basics, some of the things that you might get with your primary care doctor on an annual visit, like looking at your blood counts, your metabolic panel. Those are called CBC, CMP, maybe looking at your blood sugar, like a hemoglobin A1C, and lipids. Those are some of the basics that they're usually checking. Those are a great starting place. They are very much scratching the surface, though. So I do typically recommend going a little bit more in detail than that, getting a little bit more comprehensive, looking at things like vitamin D, iron levels, as well as ferritin. Ferritin is an indicator of iron stores in our cells and super important for women, especially if you've been menstruating, maybe having heavier menstrual cycles. Really important to make sure that that is on point. So those are some of the core tests that I would recommend. I also recommend looking at a full thyroid panel. A full thyroid panel would include TSH, free T4, free T3, possibly a total T3, total T4. I also like to check a reverse T3 for getting a complete picture, as well as thyroid antibodies, which would be called TPO antibody or thyroid peroxidase antibody, as well as an antithyroglobulin. Those are great to rule out any silent thyroid issues that could get in the way of getting and staying pregnant and good pregnancy outcomes. I recommend doing hormone testing for women. That typically would start with a day 3 hormone panel, day 3 of the cycle being day 1 being the first day of your period, and 3 to 5 days later. That would typically include LH, FSH, estradiol, testosterone, free and total, DHEA, DHT. I do also like looking at cortisol, which is our stress hormone, our waking hormone. Great to check in on that as well. Oftentimes I'll look at a prolactin at that time too. And you could check an anti-Mullerian hormone or AMH. I won't go in detail with that right now. That's a big conversation, but that can be helpful to get a good basis of where your fertility is at, what your body is doing as far as your hormones controlled by your ovaries. For men, I like looking at LH, FSH as well, testosterone, DHEA, and DHT as well. Oftentimes I'll do an estradiol as well. So those are some of the good basics for the male hormone panel. For men, I also do a prostate-specific antigen typically. And for men, I also like doing sperm testing. This is a little bit beyond the basics of blood work, but doing sperm analysis is really important and can be so helpful even before there's any fertility concern. Great to check in on that. To go a level deeper, if you are really interested in looking a little bit deeper in your health, really looking more comprehensively, typically I like recommending a test called NutrEval from a company called Genova. This is an incredible test that gives us so much information about our micronutrient levels, our micronutrient needs. It gives us information about our amino acids, which are building blocks of proteins, as well as our mineral levels. It screens for toxins and heavy metals, looks into our dysbiosis markers, basically, our gut health and our microbiome. So there are so many incredible pieces to that test. Oh, and not to mention oxidative markers and antioxidant levels. So those are really key with looking at how rapidly the aging process is happening on our cells. And we're particularly interested in how that's happening on our egg and sperm cells. So it's another great one. And then oftentimes I'm also looking into people's gut health. We do that with a stool test. My favorite one there is called GI map. And that's a great one to look at the gut microbiome in more detail and really look at factors of digestion to see if there's a lot of inflammation going on there, if there's something in that's out of balance, that's abnormal going on. So those are usually what I start with when I'm looking at someone's preconception health or a couple's preconception health. These are going to give you so much information and can we screen into some areas that could be a big issue. Now, if toxins are showing up, if something is really showing up as abnormal, sometimes we'll go deeper. You always have the option of going deeper, doing more testing, but these will give you a really incredible basis. So now let's move into what our plan can look like to optimize our health. Again, when we've done the right testing, then we'll have a lot of information to work off of and a lot of the details to really know for sure, how many B vitamins you need to be taking, how, what dose of different kinds, what level of minerals you need to be taking in. So that will give you a lot of detail, but we'll kind of talk about a general plan, a good core plan to start with and what elements you want to make sure are in line. So let's start with nutrition first. Nutrition is so essential to our overall health and well-being, and especially before conception, because like I was saying, nutrition, our nutrient levels are so critical to having good pregnancy outcomes and allowing our baby to develop as optimally as possible. So the number one framework to start with is a Mediterranean diet. Now, a Mediterranean diet has the best evidence for a lot of different health conditions, but especially for fertility outcomes and pregnancy outcomes. The Mediterranean diet basically means a whole food focused diet, a lot of fresh foods, as much variety as you can get in, lots of plants, going back to the basics of what a healthy diet could look like. Basically, you don't have to stick to any fad diet or any extremes. Really, when it comes to fertility and pregnancy, we don't want to be in the extremes. We want to just be having regular meals with a good amount of nutrition and good balance. Getting healthy fats in there, fresh fish that ideally is low mercury forms, lean meats, good amounts of protein. These are going to be the core basics of a good preconception fertility diet. Now, I get often asked, do I need to eliminate any foods? Gluten gets villainized, dairy. These are not things that you necessarily have to avoid unless you have a reaction to those, or if there's any other reason like autoimmunity or something else going on that you need to consider avoiding any food groups at all. With that said, there are certain foods that we do want to limit or be mindful about that can cause more inflammation and can get in the way of our health. One would be industrial seed oils. These are really inflammatory oils that are super processed, and they show up in a lot of processed foods. So this includes sunflower oil, safflower oil, peanut oil, rice bran oil, canola oil, vegetable oil. Again, these are going to be in a lot of the processed foods like chips, dressings, as well as restaurant foods because they're cheaper. So a lot of companies prefer to use these to save money. Unfortunately, they're just really not good for our health. So that's one thing to really be aware of. Try to limit where you can, starting to look at labels and really checking in on that. Another thing would be in general, just really heavily processed foods, fried foods. If they're looking really brown and homogenous, you can't really tell what they are, probably best to pull back a little bit from that and really, again, try to go more with the whole foods. And this can be really fairly simple to swap out. If you really enjoy crackers, trying to go for more of like the whole seed crackers. If you love tortilla chips, going for the tortilla chips with avocado oil instead of some of the other oils. So again, there are luckily so many options nowadays to still be able to have some flexibility and freedom in your diet, but to be avoiding some of the things that could be messing with your health. Alcohol is not the best for our health and something that should be, used mindfully. Now, you don't have to avoid it completely, but I do recommend being mindful, maybe limiting your intake, especially if you're having several drinks in a sitting or in a day and using it several days a week. Try to pull back a little bit, maybe 1 to 2 drinks a week or so. When you are pregnant, caffeine can possibly cause some issues, but doesn't necessarily pose an issue or problem in the preconception phase. So you don't necessarily need to limit it, but I usually recommend people start being aware of their caffeine intake and maybe pulling back if they're having several cups of coffee a day, starting to pull back, especially for the female, really being mindful about that because when you are pregnant, ideally we're aiming for 100 milligrams of caffeine or less in a day. So starting to be mindful about our use. But again, we don't have to avoid it completely. There are actually a lot of health benefits to coffee and tea, a lot of antioxidants that come with them. So those are great. Other things to kind of be aware of in your diet, being mindful about it. I mentioned a lot of variety of plants. We want to have a lot of color in our diet. Plant pigments are different antioxidants. And the more variety of colors we can get, ideally getting a rainbow every day, will give you all sorts of different antioxidants. And antioxidants go into our body and scavenge free radicals. Free radicals are these things that can damage and accelerate aging of our cells, which is not ideal. So getting lots of antioxidants can be great. You can also add in additional antioxidants by emphasizing herbs and spices. These are great for combating inflammation. Things like turmeric, ginger, herbs like cilantro, thyme, like all of them. Getting a good variety in there is amazing. And again, it could be as simple as adding pesto or chimichurri. Those are some of my favorites. Adding some of these, sauces ideally with the friendly oils. Great way to add in some additional antioxidant power to your food. All right, next let's talk about lifestyle. First, let's talk about exercise. Exercise is absolutely important to our overall health, but it doesn't have to be rigorous exercise all the time. Usually when we think of exercise, we're thinking of going to the gym, getting our reps in, but in reality, movement is exercise. Moving, not just sitting in one place, especially if you have a really sedentary job, getting up, moving, walking. That is exercise, and that goes a really long way. So, usually when I'm talking about exercise, I'm really just talking about movement, and that can feel really fun and joyful. It can be riding your bike. It can be walking to go to dinner, dancing. I highly recommend dance parties and getting some joy in there, getting some movement in your day. It can be fun. It can be silly, and you honestly get bonus points if it's something that you enjoy or something that really helps you feel calm and relaxed. So getting some general movement in there. There is no one exercise that is going to help you get pregnant or help with your health. It really depends on what is best for you. So being mindful about that. For most people, I do recommend having some sort of resistance training, something that's building up your muscles, basically pushing or pulling against something that is really overall good for our longevity and our health. And then having some sort of cardiovascular activity, again, walking, running, something that's getting your heart pumping a bit. Something that's helping you maybe get some sweat going, which supports detoxification also. So thinking about those elements and being mindful about what really feels good in your body. Now, not getting enough exercise can be harmful to our fertility and our overall health, but also getting too much exercise. And this is something that I talk with people a lot about because sometimes, again, we're overdoing it, thinking that we're doing the best for our health. We're doing, HIIT exercises 5 times a week, but we're feeling exhausted afterwards. We're really trying to push ourselves to, work harder and harder, but we're feeling really depleted. That could be too much for your body. So being really mindful about where you are in your fitness level, what your goals are, and how it feels when you do it. So let's talk about some of the other lifestyle factors now. Sleep is one of the most important things to be aware of when it comes to our fertility and our pregnancy outcomes. Sleep is so important, and it's when a lot of our hormones are being secreted. So if we're not getting great sleep, our hormones can be thrown off, our stress levels can be thrown off. There can be so many things that are impacted. So really prioritizing getting good quality sleep. Now, this means 7 to 8 hours at least for most people. For some women, more. Some of us need more, like 8 to 9 hours a night. And ideally, getting that time sleeping, not just in bed. So this is where tracking your sleep can sometimes be helpful because we aren't really aware of how many hours we're getting asleep compared to how many hours we're spending in bed. So being mindful about that aspect. And ideally having it be restorative sleep, getting some deep sleep in there, getting good REM. Again, if you're tracking your sleep with something like an Aura ring, then you'll get a lot more of this detail. But if you aren't tracking, seeing how you feel when you wake up. Are you feeling restored? Are you feeling ready to take on your day? Or are you feeling completely exhausted? If you're feeling the latter and not feeling ready to start the day, then it could be a sign that your sleep is not really on point, that maybe you're not getting enough sleep. The timing of sleep can be off too. If your hours are very variable about when you're going to sleep, when you're waking up, that can impact your sleep quality. And also if you're going to bed really late, if you're, sleeping during the day or even just going to bed really late and waking up late, and sometimes that can disrupt the quality of your sleep. So again, being mindful, getting curious about, are you really feeling like you're getting good sleep? And if you're not, then maybe making some changes around that. Some of the core principles there are having a cool, dark bedroom, making sure that you're not having so many distractions, maybe getting some clutter out of your bedroom, getting excess noise out of your bedroom or excess lights, electronics, trying to really limit the electronics that you have in your bedroom, even being mindful about where your cell phone is, especially located if it's right by your head versus across the room, ideally the latter, not so close to you. So those are some of the basics of getting really good sleep. Stress is another really important factor to have some sort of stress management. So having something in place that helps you feel relaxed, helps you feel like you can really unwind. This does not include death scrolling on social media, unfortunately, because that really doesn't lower our stress as much as we'd like it to. So at least to our nervous system and our brain, we're not getting that same message. So ideally something that's really relaxing. It can include a little bit of TV. It's not to say that you can't do those things, that you have to exclude screens, but trying to have something that feels a little bit more restorative, really more slow, more quiet. So reading, maybe meditating or doing some breath work, journaling, or just being out in nature. Walking out in nature, getting some time to ground yourself, put your feet on the ground. Those are some great practices to integrate into your daily routine or at least your weekly routine to make sure that you're managing stress. And if there are things in your environment, in your life that are super stressful that you could eliminate, that's something to be mindful about too. Taking things off your plate that aren't absolutely necessary, sometimes cutting certain people out of your life that are toxic, that can be really supportive of your overall health and your outcomes with pregnancy as well. And last but not least, let's talk a little bit about the environment of your home and toxins. So toxins, These are a huge topic and can include a lot of different things. Typically, we're going to focus a little bit more on the environmental toxins, things like chemicals that are coming in to our system through beauty products, through cleaning products, through our food. And that's a really good starting place to be aware of toxins. If you're using conventional beauty products, bath products, as well as home products, it can be good to become aware of some of the chemicals in them, start looking at ingredients. Some certain chemicals can really mess with our hormones, particularly parabens and phthalates. Phthalates typically come in the form of fragrance, and oftentimes it will say fragrance or perfume on the label rather than phthalates. So, really trying to eliminate or limit fragranced things in your environment. That includes those Glade plugins and air fresheners, as well as fragranced soaps, shampoos, conditioners, all that good stuff, perfume, as well as detergent. Really trying to go for unscented kinds or even better non-toxic options that don't have any of those parabens, phthalates in them, as well as, there is a laundry list of chemical ingredients that can be harmful. I'm not going to go into those now, but starting to become aware of, what is in the products that you use and really trying to be mindful about choosing ones that are non-toxic. There are a lot of great resources out there for determining that. I recommend the Environmental Working Group. They have a great database, so you can look up your ingredients, and they also have recommended products that they have verified. So that's a great, easy starting place. I also recommend avoiding plastics in your environment and non-stick coating in your kitchen. So plastic water bottles, plastic food containers, these are things to toss. Plastics are terrible for our health, especially when they're heated with our food or water. So really trying to eliminate those using a stainless steel or glass water bottle. And then for food storage container, using glass, again, stainless steel. Cookware, stainless steel or cast iron or ceramic cookware are great, again, without the nonstick coating. And using utensils that are maybe wood or stainless steel, silicone is fantastic rather than the plastics, especially black plastic, which has recently gotten some bad press time, which I think is great because we're all aware now of how terrible those can be with cooking. And cutting boards as well, not using plastic cutting boards, instead maybe going for a wood cutting board for that. So that really gives you a core plan to have in place to really optimize your health and your nutrition. Now let's talk a little bit about supplementation, because this is a question I get a lot, especially from people who are really being mindful about their health. Supplementation can be really supportive of our health, especially because it's nowadays really hard to get everything that we need from just our diet alone. So some of the core things that I recommend starting with would be a good quality multivitamin. For women, I'd recommend a prenatal even before trying to conceive, because it gives you a really good amount of the things that you'll need to create a baby and to replete yourself that you might be depleted in certain things. My favorite there is the Needed Prenatal Multi. They have an essentials option too if you have a hard time taking a lot of things. The more comprehensive one, though, is so fantastic, and it comes in capsules or powder, so it makes it easier. And then for men, I recommend having a multivitamin as well in the preconception phase. Needed also has a fantastic men's multi, which is my favorite there. I also recommend doing a high quality fish oil for both women and men in the preconception phase. This is going to give really good anti-inflammatory omega-3s that are super important for this phase. For that, my favorite is Nordic Naturals Pro Omega 2000. Gives you a really great dose and is a high quality source. And now another thing that can be really helpful when we're trying to optimize our egg and sperm quality can be taking additional antioxidants. Not everyone needs this necessarily, but especially for those of my patients who are over 30, then typically this is something that we're talking about to really better their chances. And this can help undo some of the oxidative damage that can happen with aging and if we have exposures to things that are accelerating aging. Some of the antioxidants that I like to include would be alpha lipoic acid, L-carnitine or acetyl L-carnitine, PQQ, and CoQ10. These are some of the kind of the basics that I usually recommend. Again, Needed has some great options here. They have an egg quality support product that includes alpha lipoic acid, carnitine, and PQQ. They have an additional CoQ10 that you can take separately. And then they also have a Sperm Support Plus, which includes a lot of great ingredients that support sperm quality and numbers and help support testosterone in a really healthy way. So those are great products too that I usually recommend in addition to some of those basics. Now, some other things that oftentimes we'll be using in this time period might be iron, like an iron bisglycinate or vitamin D. And usually when I'm recommending vitamin D, it would be D3 with K2. But that would just be if you are in need of that. For those who have great levels, they don't need to take any additional. It won't actually help anything. It can actually harm things. So those are just, on a need basis. And of course, with all of these, make sure you're talking to your doctor to find out what's best for you. There are individual variables that can play into this. So these are some of the core things I typically recommend, but make sure that you're taking the things that are best for you and your needs. So those are the things that I recommend to have a core preconception plan to really optimize your health before getting pregnant. The last thing that I will mention here is, again, with testing, if anything is showing up there that is outside the normal range, that I do recommend working with a doctor who is well trained in dealing with that before trying to conceive. For example, say you have a really high mercury level. This is something that I've dealt with several couples, and that is really important to address before trying to conceive if possible. So make sure to be working with someone and really getting the best support, doing the right testing and appropriately addressing things that are coming up and getting a really good, solid plan so you feel confident going into conception and really knowing that you've done the best already for your own health, for your baby's health, and it'll just make the process so much more fun. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and be sure to subscribe if you enjoy this information so you're staying up to date as I release more information like this. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Bye.